The French vaults that vanished. It began with a silence so complete it unsettled even those accustomed to secrecy. One morning, officials arrived to find records missing, vaults empty, and explanations nowhere to be found. The institution that had prided itself on discipline now faced a mystery that threatened to undermine the very idea of French financial stability. What vanished was not only gold, it was trust, and trust is harder to replace than metal. To understand how a disappearance shook France's banking foundations, we must return to a moment when the nation sought to rebuild its strength through order and precision. After years of upheaval, France believed stability could be engineered, crafted in vaults, shaped in policy, preserved through oversight. Banks became symbols of national reliability, their vaults representing more than reserves. They were proof that chaos was behind them. But beneath this carefully constructed certainty, vulnerabilities lingered. The story begins with a bank that held both prestige and responsibility. Its vaults protected not only private deposits but government reserves tied to strategic ambitions. For decades, this institution operated with near-flawless efficiency. Audits revealed nothing unusual. Ledgers balanced. Inspectors praised its rigor. And the public, weary of turbulence, embraced it as a quiet pillar of confidence. Yet beneath this polished surface, small inconsistencies began to emerge. A slight delay in reporting. A discrepancy dismissed as clerical error. A shipment of bullion recorded but not confirmed. Each sign was minor enough to ignore, and so they were. But as these anomalies accumulated, they formed a pattern visible only to those who studied the ledgers closely, and even then, the implications seemed too troubling to believe. Inside the bank, a few cautious voices expressed concern. They urged deeper reviews, more transparency, stronger oversight. But their warnings clashed with the institution's pride. Admitting vulnerability could invite scrutiny from political rivals, undermine public trust, and weaken France's carefully rebuilt financial image. Silence, therefore, became the default response. Still, rumors drifted through the financial district. Traders whispered that certain reserves were lower than expected. A foreign partner quietly requested verification of holdings. These doubts spread slowly, like cracks in stone. And the closer investigators looked, the more they realized that beneath the vault's imposing facade, something had gone terribly, inexplicably wrong. By the time the truth began to surface, the disappearance had already set events into motion that no one could easily stop. The vaults had not simply been emptied. They had been unmade, leaving the institution and the nation to confront a void far more alarming than any crisis they had prepared for. The first signs of unraveling emerged in a quiet internal audit, one meant to confirm routine balances. Clerks noticed that several entries tied to bullion shipments did not align with physical counts. At first, they attributed the inconsistency to simple oversight, a misplaced record, a delayed confirmation, a shipment logged under the wrong date. But as they traced each entry backward, the discrepancies multiplied. Entire movements of gold appeared recorded but unverified. Transactions lacked signatures. Some serial numbers showed up twice, others not at all. Whispers spread through the office floors. Auditors compared notes in hushed tones, uneasy about what the inconsistencies suggested. To raise the issue openly risked provoking panic, yet ignoring it risked something far worse. They pushed the matter upward, expecting clarity from senior officials. Instead, they found resistance cloaked in formality. Executives insisted the ledgers were accurate and that any gaps stemmed from temporary misfiling. But their reassurances felt scripted, too practiced to be trusted. Behind those closed doors, tension escalated. The leadership knew more than they admitted. Small irregularities had been surfacing for months, each one patched over with explanations that satisfied no one fully. Some suspected internal misconduct, employees manipulating records for personal gain. Others feared external interference, pressures from foreign interests or covert political operations exploiting weaknesses in the bank's oversight. Yet no one dared suggest the most alarming possibility, that the vaults contained less gold than the nation believed. Meanwhile, France's financial district sensed that something was wrong. Traders noticed unusual delays in bullion transfers. Partners requesting verification received evasive replies. Insurance brokers quietly raised concerns about missing documentation in recent shipments. The mood shifted from curiosity to suspicion, then to unease. Everyone understood that gold reserves formed the backbone of confidence. If the numbers were wrong, the implications would reach far beyond a single institution. Publicly, the bank maintained its polished calm. Reports were filed. Statements issued. But inside, executives initiated a deeper investigation, an inquiry so sensitive it bypassed traditional oversight channels. What they found eroded the foundation of certainty the bank had built over decades. A network of unauthorized transactions, forged confirmations, and concealed withdrawals pointed toward a systemic breach. Whether born of arrogance, negligence, or deliberate sabotage, the result was the same: the vaults no longer held what the ledgers promised. The discovery sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government. Ministers gathered in emergency meetings, their discussions marked by alarm. If word of the missing reserves spread, markets could collapse overnight. Political opponents would seize the moment, foreign adversaries would exploit it, and public trust, already fragile, could shatter. The disappearance had the potential to ignite a crisis that reached far beyond banking. And yet, the truth could not stay hidden forever. Each day brought new inconsistencies, new revelations, new evidence that someone or many someones had manipulated the system in ways no one had anticipated. France's leaders now faced a perilous choice: contain the crisis quietly, risking further erosion behind the scenes, or expose it fully and confront the storm that would follow. The vaults had vanished, but their absence created something even more dangerous: a void of certainty, a vacuum that pulled the entire nation toward a reckoning it was not prepared to face. The reckoning began with a single question whispered in a late-night meeting: if the vaults were empty, how long had they been empty? The room fell silent as officials realized the implications. This was not a recent failure. It was a slow erosion: years of concealed withdrawals, falsified confirmations, and internal decay masked by a reputation too strong for anyone to challenge. The institution's prestige had become its hiding place. Investigators worked through the night, piecing together fragments of records that did not belong. Some documents had been altered with such precision that only microscopic discrepancies revealed the truth. Others were blatant forgeries, inserted during moments when oversight had been assumed rather than enforced. The deeper the team looked, the clearer it became: this was not the work of a lone rogue employee or a careless administrator. The scale was too broad, the patterns too deliberate. The disappearance of France's bullion was not an accident, it was a system failing from within. As internal reports circulated among senior officials, panic began to seep into the decisions made behind closed doors. Some ministers demanded immediate disclosure, insisting that truth, even devastating truth, was the only path to restoring trust. Others argued that revealing the full extent of the breach would unleash chaos. They imagined markets collapsing overnight, foreign governments questioning France's credibility, and citizens rushing to withdraw savings from every institution in the country. Transparency promised honesty, but secrecy promised time, and time, in crisis, felt like survival. Outside these chambers, subtle tremors reached the financial district. Traders noticed unusual government activity. Journalists whispered about an auditing irregularity. Foreign banks requested confirmations twice, then 3 times. Nothing was confirmed, yet everyone sensed that France was bracing for something unprecedented. Confidence, the silent architecture of the nation's financial system, wobbled under the weight of rumors. Within the bank itself, alliances fractured. Some executives insisted they had been unaware of the misconduct. Others exchanged accusations, desperate to distance themselves from the disaster. Careers built over decades dissolved overnight. The institution, once known for discipline and precision, now revealed a core of mistrust and fear. Longtime employees wondered how much they had failed to see, or how much they had chosen not to question. Then came the revelation that deepened the crisis further. Several overseas partners reported stalled transactions tied to the missing bullion, indicating that the breach had extended beyond the vaults and into international operations. France's financial relationships, carefully cultivated through diplomacy and reliability, now hung by a thread. Letters of credit issued months earlier suddenly appeared questionable. Foreign officials demanded explanations that French leaders still did not fully possess. The government ordered a final sweep of the vaults and records. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Multiple accounts had been drained entirely, others partially, with the missing gold dispersed through a maze of transactions designed to obscure its path. Some funds had been routed through foreign intermediaries, others had vanished into shell entities that dissolved the moment investigators approached them. The crisis was not just national, it was international, political, and deeply personal for those whose reputations had been anchored to the bank's once impeccable image. By now, the reality had settled like a heavy fog over Paris. The vaults were not simply empty. They were evidence of a betrayal that struck at the heart of France's identity. The nation faced not only financial loss but a moral wound, one that called into question the very structures it had built to ensure stability. The government could delay the truth for only so long. A decision loomed, unavoidable and immense. Either France would reveal the full extent of the collapse and endure the storm that followed, or it would attempt to rebuild trust quietly, hoping the public never learned just how deep the disappearance had gone. But the void left by the missing gold continued to widen. And with each passing day, the tension grew sharper, pointing toward a moment when concealment would no longer be possible and the disappearance would explode into full public view. The moment the government had feared arrived not through an official announcement, but through a leak. A confidential report, intended for only a handful of senior officials, surfaced in the hands of a journalist known for exposing the stories no one wished to tell. The article appeared at dawn, its headline stark and unforgettable: France's central vaults held far less gold than the nation believed. The publication spread with the speed of lightning. Within minutes, the story reached every corner of Paris, then every major financial capital in Europe. Panic began as a whisper and then surged into a roar. Crowds gathered outside bank branches, demanding answers that clerks were not trained or authorized to give. Traders rushed to liquidate positions tied to French credit. Foreign governments sent urgent messages requesting clarification. And in the corridors of power, officials scrambled to control a crisis that had escaped its containment. The disappearance was no longer a guarded secret. It was a national reckoning. The government convened an emergency session, its members confronting a bitter truth: the nation could not repair trust with silence. They had to speak. By evening, an official statement was broadcast across France. The minister did not deny the breach. Instead, he explained that the nation's reserves had been compromised by years of mismanagement, internal misconduct, and systemic failures. It was a confession that stunned the public. But it was also the first step toward confronting the catastrophe honestly. In the hours that followed, France announced sweeping reforms. The implicated bank would be placed under state control. A full forensic audit would be conducted. Oversight mechanisms would be overhauled, with new layers of review imposed to prevent anything similar from happening again. Some officials resigned. Others were dismissed. Investigations opened into executives, intermediaries, and foreign entities suspected of facilitating the disappearance. The machinery of accountability creaked into motion. Yet even as the government acted decisively, the consequences radiated outward. Markets dropped sharply. Investors questioned the stability of French institutions. Allies raised concerns about commitments and guarantees. Ordinary citizens felt betrayed, wondering how an institution entrusted with safeguarding the nation's wealth could allow such a failure to unfold. The disappearance had become more than a financial scandal, it was a crisis of identity. But slowly, a shift began. The state's intervention stabilized the most vulnerable institutions. Depositors received guarantees. Trade routes adjusted. Credit markets steadied. Confidence, though damaged, did not collapse entirely. France had chosen transparency over concealment, accountability over denial. It was a painful path, but one that offered a way forward. In the aftermath, the nation reflected on the lesson carved into its history. Systems built on trust must be guarded with vigilance. Prestige is not protection. And oversight, ignored long enough, becomes the very weakness that invites disaster. The French vaults had vanished, but in their absence emerged a deeper truth about the fragility of financial power. What happened in that crisis is not just a chapter from the past. It echoes through every modern debate about transparency, regulation, and the responsibilities of those who safeguard national wealth. Subscribe to join the journey.